So I have personally never met Sky Sorensen, but I saw a video last night where he talked about the connections between Dallin H. Oaks and the BYU electroshock therapy. Even though I've never met Sky personally, I've known hundreds like him who defend the actions of a church despite their horrific actions. So on the 9th of February 2026, I made several comments on his video. I was following that, I was blocked and all of my comments were deleted. So I'd like to address some of those comments here in an abbreviated format. So already at the very beginning of his video, he talks about how this problem is probably the least understood. I find that to be a real cop-out phrase, oftentimes used by apologists. I think that the phrase opens up a lot of faithful members to say, maybe I have been looking at this problem at face value. Maybe I need to listen to what this guy has to say, even if the obvious answer is most likely. When somebody says that a problem is misunderstood, I think, or at least understood, I should say, I think that it is a total cop-out. The concept of Occam's razor suggests that with competing explanations, the one with the fewest assumptions is usually the most likely to be correct. The idea that Oaks knew about the electroshock therapy is most likely because he was president of the school at the time, and the whole process of that therapy was pretty ingrained into Oaks' presidency. So then Sky proceeded to pull out documentation coming from the Fair Latter-day Saints website, which is documentation of the electroshock therapy study that was done. Not really talking about the whole problem at BYU and the hostile culture and community, but he is talking about specifically with this one study. And that study can be viewed on the BYU website in the archives. So once again, Sky, at around a minute and 2 seconds in, he talks about how there's no evidence that Oaks knew about this research study. As far as I know, that's true. Oaks even publicly denied that it happened at BYU during his presidency. However, what Sky is not referencing is that the study was not the only time that electroshock therapy or aversion therapy was happened at BYU. It went on in the decades before and after Oaks's presidency, ending sometime in the 1990s. Oaks said that the electroshock therapy ended before the presidency of his starting in 1971, and I think it went into 1979, 1980. If nothing else, that means that Oaks did admit that it happened in the past at BYU, which a lot of members don't even know that this happened at BYU. The McBride study done in the mid-70s is just the most publicized and most known about, but it wasn't the only time that this ever happened. And Sky, I think, purposely is not acknowledging the fact that this happened before and after. So he's just referencing this one study saying Oaks didn't even know about it. So I think that that's very disingenuous and very dishonest. In 1959, at a meeting at BYU, President Wilkinson met with 3 apostles, including Dallin H. Oaks, to discuss the growing problem of homosexuality. As a result of that meeting, as I said, Oaks did attend that meeting. The aversion program began at BYU. This included electroshock therapy, vomit-inducing therapies, visual and pain stimulation therapies. As of 1959, Oaks knew that it was going on at BYU. 12 years later, he became president of that school. As he was there from the beginning of this program at BYU, it's illogical to me that he's completely unaware of what's going on at BYU campus. 10 seconds later, around 1 minute and 12 seconds in, yes, I will agree with Sky here. It's one of the few times I do agree with the information that he says. There were lots of studies being done at BYU. Once again, Sky is circling back to only discussing the study and Oaks' connection to the study, that was the McBride study, and not the actual issues going on, and not talking about the fact that like the aversion therapy and electroshock therapy was going on before and after. He's not referring to that. He's only referring to the study because there is evidence that Oakes knew nothing about the study. Actually, no. What I will say is there's no evidence that Oakes knew about the study. There's no evidence that he didn't know. It's not as if he was interviewed at the time and he said that it wasn't going on or something like that. So he's acknowledging only the study, and he's not acknowledging the anti-gay culture at BYU at the time. So continue on with that. The electroshock therapy culture program, or the electroshock therapy and the homosexual culture was a wider part of the Lavender Scare in American history. This is when homosexuality was criminalized. There were few, if any, protections, and gay people were commonly arrested in sting operations by police, but we're going to talk about that later. At about 1:34, he does talk about how, yes, these were volunteers. I think that word should really be in quotes because, quite honestly, I find it disingenuous. Again, prior to Oakes being president, BYU had issued a ban on all gay and lesbian students. In fact, I think that the quote, and I don't know the exact words, but it said something like, the president of BYU told all gay students to just leave, and because they weren't welcome there. So Oakes was a little bit kinder and then asked that just students not be overt about it. But it wasn't as if Oakes was accepting. The administrator of the Honor Code Office, Gerald Dye, stated that the Standards Office had a set procedure for gay students. So if they were referred there for, breaking the Honor Code, through one of the sting operations or the policing, and we'll talk about that aspect more later, they would be sent to the Honor Code Office, and then in order to deal with those students, they would then refer them to different therapies, and that included electroshock therapy and the aversion therapy. So at the time, also BYU would not send their credits if they did choose to leave. So they were given the option, you were given the option, you could either stay and go through the therapies, or if you leave, your family is going to be told, society will then know, the church will know, and your name will be kind of like besmirched with homosexuality. And at the time, that was tantamount to like a prison sentence because there were no protections of employment or housing or any of those natures. So were these people voluntary if their credits were going to be held hostage? That really is only voluntary in the most technical sense of the definition. From about 1:44 until 2 minutes and 4 seconds in, he talks about how he does acknowledge that people with same-sex attraction or same-gender attraction, I forget which one he used in the video, were not always treated very well. I think that's an understatement. So for about 40 or 50 years, students endured this treatment at BYU. The electroshock therapy program was ineffective, but students sometimes chose to pretend as if they were successful just to get out of the program. My cousin Paul Mortensen, who is one of the founders of Affirmation, met some of these participants, and some of them experienced PTSD. One that he told me about couldn't handle human touch, including a handshake. Before Paul's death a few years ago, he confided that information to me. So these people, he's trying to act as if this is not a huge issue, that, the electroshock therapy wasn't a problem, but it really was. So 2 minutes, 17 seconds in, he says, once again, he's making this sound super complex and making it sound as if Oakes is completely innocent of all wrongdoing because there isn't direct evidence that he knew about this particular study, this McBride study, which is only one example of, I've heard anywhere from 14 to 17 students being involved. This is one particular study. This is not talking about the whole program that was handled by BYU. When people start saying like, oh, well, BYU didn't do this. This was a study. This was only done by this psychology department. That's not true because it was going on with other people. Do you understand? Like, it's not just this thing that Sky keeps talking about. It wasn't just this one study. It was going on before and after for decades and years. BYU was a really hostile environment for gay students. Oaks knew about programs and even started some of these programs, including policing students. There were mass interrogations of the male students in the art programs, cornering gay students in the music and dance programs. Gay and straight students were even offered college credit if they worked to find other gay students and turn them in. There were fake ads put into newspapers. There were people that were trying to meet up, in a personals ad. And if it was learned that it was a BYU student, then they were sent to the honor code office, which then further fed this whole honor code system of the aversion therapy program. I mean, this is not like, oh yeah, the one study, let's say, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But really, I mean, it went beyond that. I mean, there were honor code officers going to the gay clubs and gay bars and writing down license plates and then checking them against BYU students. And so it was known for the students at the time that they needed to park farther away so that then if they had to walk multiple blocks, at least then their car wasn't going to be noticed. So that's the reality. So to give you kind of an idea of what the church believed and what it was like to be at BYU, here's a quote from a BYU professor. This was published in the Ensign in July 1975. Children learn how to love in a stable, healthy family. Parents need to know that lack of proper affection in the home can result in unnatural behavior in their children, including homosexuality. I think what Skye also misses is that the long-term trauma from these practices and the hostile environment at BYU is still evident. Survivors of this period have nearly all left the church. I don't know of anybody that is still affiliated with the church that was part of the church at this time. Many are deceased, both from the AIDS crisis as well as just from old age, because this happened a long time ago. Several students, I know of at least two, jumped to their own deaths. From what I have understood, they were part of this program. They had been policed. BYU threatened to tell their parents, and this would have resulted in them being kicked out of their homes, being kicked out of their families, and kicked out of the church, as well as any future employment being at risk, because this was at a time period when being gay was illegal and there were no protections. So at the same time, the church was strongly pushing a narrative that homosexuality was caused by elements within the home. So just like that quote that I mentioned from 1975, they were also taught that it could be cured and that heterosexual marriage would cure it. I mean, this was something that was standard at the time, and it resulted in thousands of marriages between gay men and women in heterosexual marriages to somebody of the opposite sex. And that never cured anybody. Just like being shocked never cured anybody. Students who have lived through this experience can testify that BYU was a very hostile and unsafe environment, especially if any staff learned about that student's homosexuality. It wasn't safe. So sorry, Skye, your video does very little to explain what was going on at BYU at the time. You yourself have stated that this problem is not understood by many. Clearly from this video, you do not seem to understand the problem at all either. You don't seem to understand the topic because you're referring back just this study, and you're making excuses, quite frankly. There were people who died, who experienced death and torture at the hands of people who should have known better, because these people are said to have spoken to and for God. And the current prophet of the church, president of the church, President Oaks, was aware of what was going on, and he didn't do anything to stop it. Just remember that, okay? And these people are just like you, Skye, trying to fit into the church, but at a time when they couldn't fit in. It was a square peg in a round hole, even more so than now, okay? So you talking about it as if it's not a big deal and that Oaks had no problems or no connections to this is disingenuous, and you're not being honest with your audience. You're not telling them what it was like at the school at the time. You should be ashamed of yourself. Continuing on. There was a lot more going on at BYU during this time. I would suggest everybody that is reading this, if they want to know what was going on, you can read On the Record from the Latter-day Stories website. It's a free download. All it is, compilation of quotes and experiences. You can also read The Piety Police, which was an article published last year by the Yale Law Journal. You can also read Gay Rights in the Mormon Church, Intended Actions, Unintended Consequences by Gregory Prince. Those three sources are fantastic. One is coming from the church directly. Okay. One is coming from a historian that's researched this in depth, and another is coming from, it's got fully sourced citations that talk about this policing that was done at BYU. So if you want to learn the truth, don't listen to Sky Sorensen, because he clearly doesn't know what's going on in this topic. He blocked me when I was trying to discuss this so that his listeners would actually know what was really going on. So I find that very disingenuous. And because he blocked me, he probably won't even learn about this video, and that's fine by me.